Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is the author of several books, no other than Mr. Sean D.W. Parker.
Hi, Daniel. Nice to be here.
Yes, Mr. Sean, thank you for your time. And can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm just Sean. I'm a writer, artist, and academic from England, um, and I've published about to 9 books and contributed to 4 more. And I'm here to talk about a couple of them in turn.
Oh, yes, definitely. For the last two episodes, Mr. Sean, can we do the recap of the books that we talk about? Compelling Speech, The Stammering Enigma, and State of Independence from Pop Art, Rock, and Beyond.
Yeah. Yes. Compelling Speech I published last year, 2022, which is an autobiographical look at stammering, being a stammerer, and its kind of cultural implications. And the year before, sorry, no, that was 2023, as in this year, earlier this year. And the year before, 2022, I published the, the dates of independence from pop art to art rock and beyond, which is like a list book of controversial records which have been inspired by the art rock genre over the last 50 years or so.
Yes, and how about State of Independence from pop art to art rock and beyond?
It's a long title in two halves, that one. But yeah, it's the same book. It's about music and how the ideas of the songwriters can be changed by the media in order to make those songs more controversial. So that's what that book's all about.
Yes, people, if you are interested how Mr. Sean created those books, the flaws, those intricate styles of writing of Mr. Sean, please do listen to our previous episodes. So, Mr. Sean, which one of your books we're gonna talk about?
Right. The next one, going backwards in time, that I published in was in to 2018, and that was called Bean Soup, which I can't say that well with my stammer, but yeah, it was published then. And what kind of the book is essentially, it's a very tense and quite kind of mixed up book, to be honest. That doesn't make it a bad read. As far as the reviewers are concerned, I don't talk about my books with a value judgment, but it's a very scattershot state of the end of the closure of my arts venue and being in a problematic legal situation. So it puts all those things into the prism of poetry and observation, and Bean Soup is the product of that.
Wow. So, Mr. Sean, what's the big difference of writing poetry and writing academic book?
Well, it couldn't be more different, I suppose. Academic is about a theme outside yourself and which you're specializing in, for example, justice reform or stammering. And it's important to get to what other people have said and to contextualize that into what you want to say about it, to stretch that thinking to different thoughts, and then to put the references of what other people have said into it. So academic writing is like a job, but when you do it well, it can become like an art form as well, and that's the best stuff to read. When it comes to poetry, there are no rules. There are some sort of sciences that other poetic students of literature have tried to impose, but as far as I'm concerned, there are no rules. It's an expression of the art of linguistics from inside yourself in whichever language you're speaking, and you get that out in the most powerful, beautiful way, and something that impacts the listener depending on what you're saying. And the state of mind that you're in at the time, if you can sculpt that into word pictures from sentence to paragraph, then you'll probably have a poem by the end of it rather than like an academic document.
In your part, Mr. Sean, which easier to write?
It entirely depends on the mood, doesn't it? If you're in a poetic mood or a reflective mood, or that's just happening in your insides at that time, a poem's going to come anyway, and it might turn into a song, possibly if you put your guitar to it. But if you're thinking about how you feel about something, the poetic response is natural, and or how you're observing something that you care about. Then, but if you want to do something fair, which is to look at a thing academically, kind of weigh it up, and do an analytical piece of work, you have to get rid of quite a lot of that poetry, basically. Otherwise, the reader will be unconvinced, suspicious, or think that that person doesn't want to read a poem. They want to read something that's been studied.
Definitely, indeed, Mr. Sean. So, bean soup, how did you crafted it?
Yeah, I was, as I say, I was in a difficult position, having had to leave the business I was running, which was an arts centre, that had been closed by the council, and I was facing legal problems. So I went to a different town along the coast to be closer to other friends, and I just thought, right, well, I need to record this sort of process just in case I'm not able to write for a period of time, from being disallowed to do so. So I just put together a lot of the observations I've been making at that venue and afterwards, from the process of these legal adventures of mine, and they took the form of a few essays. There's a little bit of stammering in there to contextualize the stress of the stammer and being accused. So that is a big part of the book, and then some poems as well from me and from other poets. For example, Mr. Rudyard Kipling is in there for some reason. And there are photographs too of my artistic life up to that point. It was like a reckoning, because I knew that I was up against something big, and I wanted to make a statement before I might not be able to speak for a while. And that's what Bean Soup actually is.
Interesting. You describe the writing of Mr. Rudyard Kipling. What is it?
Rudyard Kipling is a figure from the early 20th century who was is an Englishman who was also quite a colonizer, or he was involved in the colonies. Because he lived in India quite a lot. I believe he was part Indian as well, but he had a big sort of sense of the empire, and he was quite connected to that. And he wrote a poem called "If," which is about becoming a man. It's quite sort of famous. If you can keep your head whilst all around you are losing theirs, etc. And he wrote the Jungle Book. So all of the anamorphism in that book, which is obviously very famous, came out of his pen. He had a beautiful sense of speaking to children and to humanity in a time before identity politics, we can say. So he's become quite controversial recently, but he was a major figure in English literature and remains so, and is going to after all the controversy about him has gone. But I wanted to put in a poem of his, which isn't If, it's another one, to capture the feelings of empire and watching that slip away.
What are the elements of Mr. Rudyard Kipling that put in a Jungle Book that make this famous, phenomenal in the world?
I suppose it was Mr. Disney that made it properly phenomenal. But before that, yes, it was successful, wasn't it? I mean, before my time. But I think it's about the fact that all the animals involved in that are unknown to Europe. So there's a big degree of exoticism. And then you've got the narrator character of the boy, Mowgli, who I believe is essentially, the book is written through his eyes, isn't it? Or it's like his experiences with all these lovely animals, characters around them. And the big bad cat isn't actually bad, he's complicated. And the big bear isn't stupid, he's complicated. And so Kipling has all those complications of characters, which are so valuable when you're learning. And I think that's what people respond to in that book, and then was captured so wonderfully in the cartoon.
Yes, definitely agree there, Mr. Sean. Bean Soup, what behind the title of your poetry book?
Ah, Bean Soup. Bean is my childhood nickname because I was actually kind of christened, not christened, but I was given the name Ben by my mother, and then I couldn't say Ben for years because of my stammer. So at the age of 20, I added a Sean to the beginning of it by default, so it's official. And when you put the two of those words together, you get Bean. So I didn't want to totally get rid of Ben because it's my inheritance and it's a nice enough name. I just couldn't say it then. I can say it better now. And I was in what you could call a pickle in English, but also a soup is better than pickle. Bean pickle's a bit too ingredientsy, so I called it bean soup because I felt like I was in a right bad situation, and I was. And this is a reflection of how I felt with my own linguistic slant on things, I guess.
Yes, so Mr. Sean, can you recite one of your favorite poem in the book?
Oh, blimey.
I love to hear it.
um, you know, Daniel, I would, but they're not actually springing to my mind at the moment. I've written about 150 poems, and the ones that are in this book, I wouldn't actually be able to drag out. So I'm going to have to say no to you right now. But I'm really sorry about that.
No
I should have prepared
worries.
for that one.
No worries, Mr. Sean. Bean soup. What do you think the chapters that you love the most?
I think the chapters that I love the most are the ones where I'm starting to discuss about the impact of kind of the American politics of the Trump era and election on British culture, on Brexit, and how those things were tying together at that time at the end of the 2020, the 20 teens, and because they were very powerful. It was a very dramatic sort of, and I could see what was happening to the media. And there's a chapter in there called the Zonkersborg, and I was trying to remember the reason I called it Zonkersborg, and it's because my girlfriend at the time, who was American, came up with this word "bork," and I was trying to understand it, and she just had her own sort of language. So I have a habit of picking up people's sort of phrases and putting them into my chapters of my books. So that one was about the American impact on England and how that was affecting the British legal system too. So that sticks in my memory somewhat.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Sean. If you want to go back and revise the book itself, which part of the book you want to revise?
That's a pretty good question because I'm not going to say I rushed it out, but it's definitely the most sort of prepared in an emergency thing I've ever done, because part of my brain was on these legal problems I was up against. A lot of my brain was on that, but I always keep the art going, and I knew I wanted to get this out soon. So the editing, because I do a lot of my own editing and then have it checked, sort of put by another editor, because I'm an editor myself, so I get two sets of eyes. I think could have been done better, but I always think that about my books, so that might not being fair. But it's not a novel; it's a bunch of different ideas strung together, and the result of that is to turn out very poetic. And really, it's up to the reader how they feel about that. They don't have to read it sequentially; they can dip in and dip out and still have an idea of what's going on. So, yes, again, I haven't answered your question properly, but gave it a go.
Yes, but before we go on, Mr. Sean, I want to shout out to the people listening in Singapore. Shasha Singapore for supporting this podcast in Central Singapore Community Department Council. I got 81% audience share. Singapore at 18% and Toppings Newtown 1%. Thank you, Singapore, for supporting this podcast, because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world, like Mr. Sean B.W. Parker. Do you have another title of this book, Bean Soup?
You mean the book? The title that it was going to be.
Yes,
Um,
another option of the title of the book.
yeah, I think it was going to be called. I mean, It's now like sort of to 5 years ago, isn't it? So I think it was going to be called "The Fat Green Cancer Sex Secret" for a while. But I came away from that in order to give it this nickname idea instead, because that's a bit, you know, it's a bit long. that one.
So you make it shorter, like bean soup.
Exactly.
Oh, that'd be awesome. You mentioned a while ago about Brexit. What are the issues that you talk about in the book?
Um, um, I could tell how the media was working on people's um, kind of conservative impulses with things like the urge to Brexit and to independence, and the global impulses, which are towards looking at the world and attempting to join with that in order to get progress in that way, and the tensions between this that were playing out in all kinds of fields. Um, so I didn't actually vote in Brexit because I failed to see the spiritual thing at the time. I would prefer to let the country decide on something that I wasn't sure about, and I'm still a little bit like that because it's just a political thing. I didn't see it as emotional, but everyone else was seeing it as very emotional, and it was dividing families and all this kind of thing. And how does one feel about it? But I didn't recognize that. So or if I don't engage in something, I always like to write about it because that's more interesting than actually engaging with something and writing about it. Because in that sense, can become a polemic. But if you don't have like a skin in the game, then it's just a much more interesting thing. You can observe and talk about the effect on the people as opposed to the effect on the country, which we're seeing now.
Do you think, in your opinion, did the United Kingdom people chosen the right decision in Brexit?
It continues to be a controversial point, and it depends on the media you read because all of the papers that supported Brexit continue to, and all the papers that supported Remain continue to. We have seen, honestly, that the economy has not done as badly as people were suspecting. So there have been, and possibly that's because of Brexit, or possibly it's not. It's just that the economy has been fine, and we're doing fine. So that's just an observation about that thing. And without, and this thing is essentially an economical question. It's just people want to. I mean, what I personally think is that we are a part of Europe, and we're going to be friends, and we should be friends, and we should do trade. I just don't want to be ruled by the unelected leaders, and that's soft Brexit, and I'm pretty comfortable in that position, really. So yeah, and if you don't want your country to be led by people you haven't elected, it is actually a brave thing to do. So I suppose that's my stance on it. But I'm not particularly staunch on almost anything politically. I just do things which seem right in my conscience, like a floating voter.
Yes, definitely, Mr. Sean. Bean soup. What are the things that you want to include but you miss it?
Uh, at at the time I was writing it, I was deeply hurt by some issues that had happened at the venue that I was telling you about, the arts venue. So I couldn't go deeply into the reasons why I was hurt about it because they were personal and heavy and the rest of it. But they're to come out in the future books, because I don't let anything go that's of value like that. So there were things that I wasn't able to involve that I wanted to, but you can probably read them between the lines because I do hint at what had gone on, which was kind of the local council difficulties with the venue, allegations that were made against certain people at that place. So yeah, there were things I couldn't say, but I hinted towards that I will say in the future.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Sean. Before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Food 101, our third season with Chef Alessandro, one of the best executive chefs in one of the best restaurants in downtown Toronto. Plus one more. Our books are out. Not only one, but 7 volumes, people. Food 101, Volume 1 Basics until 7, available on Amazon and leading online bookstores worldwide. Plus, my books of Book 101 Review, people, is out. Volume 1 to Volume 3. Volume 1 is talk about a highly recommended book. It's all about my 100 episodes of my first season of Book 101 Review. So please do grab a copy. Available on Amazon and leading online bookstores worldwide.
That sounds great, by the way, your little advert there. I'm going to have a look at that. Well, as the ad was on earlier, I actually looked through the book and I found a poem for you if you'd like me to read it.
Oh, yes, definitely. I'm interested to it.
Did my research at last. Okay, this is called Brown-Eyed World. Brown-Eyed World. Let they who are without sin cast the first stone. Before you click share on your mobile telephone, sex projection and the butcher's hook. Don't try to catch a falling knife on the promise you took. A charm offensive in a brown-eyed world. Think on the right side of a God-shaped hole. To show me those white-hot Russians in love, as the brown-eyed world looks cold as tears above. To sometimes I feel like a black American, an ugly business, but algorithmically yours. All we read are fat green cancer sex secrets. To grow servant now in a bed made for 4. Put me there, and what can I do? I breathe through your disease. Telogem effluvium in snippets and verse. Texarkana barbers and the beauty supply. The gospel of the low art dilettante. Dinosaurs of the Puritan age need not apply. Miss Reader now is the wolf at the door. You are your own high-functioning mechanism. A cacophony of indifference in nubot nulit. Suavemente besame through your glittering prism.
Wow, interesting, Mr. Sean. You combine modern poetry to the classic poetry, right?
You got it. You got it. I hope so, anyway.
Mr. Sean, bean soup. What else you can say about it?
Well, like I say, it's got some photos in it. So because of the chaos that it can be, if you dip in and out, it's like it's not sequential. There's like that poem and the chapter of Brexit and the chapter on stammering. So in order to try and create a narrative, I put in a bunch of old photographs from my Istanbul band days and from the lecturing tours I did and things like this, just to give a sense of a visual of me and the fact that it is autobiographical, but in a way that kind of compelling speech wasn't. Compelling speech was about the stammer. This is autobiographical about like a career up to that point, which was about to hit the skids in a big way. So it's not celebratory. It's quite gonzo, and it's but it's got these pictures in order to give the viewer a bit of relief, basically, I suppose.
Yes, and according to Mr. Perry Como, I love his scatterbomb style of attacking topics. So can you give us example of this scatterbomb style of attacking topics of your writing?
Yeah, that's Perry, who's the songwriter of the Magic Sponge in London, a brilliant art rock band. I think it's him that did that review way back then. And yeah, I mean, he knows as a reader of mine that I will go from chapter to chapter, hitting on subjects which interest me at that point, and then not particularly feel the need to create an editorial link between them. So there's like a shock, and I'm like, oh, kind of where am I in the reader? After the second or third chapter, you get used to that, so there's no problem. But like a continuation of a novel from the start, it can be confusing. But I like that confusion because I think there's some art in that when you do it well, and it's up to the reader if I've done that well or not. Basically, that's scattershot, and he's not wrong, especially with this book. Not all my books are like that. Compelling speech is very thematic. I mean, it's a narrative, but this one isn't a narrative, so don't go at it expecting that.
So, Mr. Sean, when you're writing Bean Soup, do you have a specific writer that you are aiming to emulate?
No, I never have that, because that would be too much of a giveaway. However, to answer a bit more fairly, I was definitely quite into Kurt Vonnegut at the time. So it's not that you're trying to emulate these people, but their style and their words are definitely seeping into your soul somewhere and then coming out of your fingertips, aren't they? So probably Kurt Vonnegut would be a fair.
If you describe Mr. Von writing, what is it?
Kurt Vonnegut. It's a mid sort of 20th century American expressionist style, where your feelings come out without too much editing, and it's there in front of you how you feel about things, and you describe things in a minimalistic way, in a kind of Hemingway sort of style, just in order to not waste words. So to get the emotional impact out without wasting words is what the Vonnegut used to do, with that essential human truth inside it, which we're rapidly losing, But just to say how you feel and why you feel about it, and if you need to swear, you swear, and he's got the philosophical truths inside what he does brilliantly.
Very well said, Mr. Sean. And can you please invite our listeners to buy all your books?
Certainly can. If they go to Amazon in their country or Amazon.com for the whole shebang, and look up Sean SEAN Parker, Sean B.W. Parker, they'll see all the books we're talking about on there. This one is I don't think it's hidden, but it might be, because it's a couple of years ago now. But it's they're down there, and they're all wonderful, But that's the one we're talking about today, so that's the place to find it at.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Sean, because if you support him, more books to come. Are you writing books nowadays, Mr. Sean?
I am. I've always got something on the go, Dan. It's just I'm hoping. What I do know is that next year I'm going to be publishing a collection of poems on the justice system, so called the Panopticon. So that's it's like an official publisher, and it's going to be quite a big deal. So up until that, and hopefully around that time, I'll come back onto your show to talk about it, because that would be great. So that'll be next summer, I think.
Mr. Sean, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, my son.
Maricon people, see you soon.